Justin, how you doing, man?
Hey Lance, how's it going?
So good. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. You too. Thanks for having me on. It's a real privilege. I've been catching up on some of your stuff and getting your backstory and wow,
Yeah, likewise, man.
heartbreaking, compelling and inspiring. So
Yeah, man. You as well. Like that's why this is just so incredible to be able to come together and share these kind of stories, right? And I was talking about this actually yesterday with somebody, and when you hear other people's stories, and then we compare our stories, and you realize you realize you're not alone, with this stuff. Like, so many people are going through or have been through such incredible adversity. And
yeah.
I think a lot of times we feel like we're the only one going through it, and it's nice to know that so many people are going through it as well. We're not alone in this.
Yeah. I think that's huge. And I also think it's one of the great challenges of people struggling with mental illness. And your brother is in case in point is that often at that point, they feel like they are the only person in the world who's ever felt like this before. And they're so alien to everybody else that nobody will understand. And it's only the power of human compassion to speak out about, you know, we're all bleeding, everybody is hurting. And once we share that, then we possibly save some people's lives by just reaching out and asking for help.
Yeah, the sharing of it is so important. And I think that is really where the healing all begins. It's being able to share it, to
Yeah.
kind of air it out a bit, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't have the power over you that it would if you just hold it in. And, conditioning in our society, we're told to just hold things in, right? In the past, growing up, it's like, hold that in. That's what strength is.
Yeah, like man up, right? You know,
Yeah.
that's the big one. And I think I think it's a challenge, right? Because as an entrepreneur and somebody who has built stuff and, being successful and all that kind of stuff, there is a place for that sense of resilience and determination that you have to kind of push through a lot of stuff to get where you want to go to.
Yeah.
But we must not mix that up with the difference between I do not feel mentally well and man up. That's a gray area, and I think kids don't get that. It's we need strong people, who can lead younger people into believing that it's okay to talk about how you feel. I've got a 13-year-old son, and we talk all the time at home, and I want him to have that sense of understanding and ability to communicate. But it's not easy because the flip side is all they hear about is in sport, especially, suck it up, get on with it.
Yeah. You're right. I think I've thought about this, and I've gone back and forth with it too, especially in sports. It's like you need a certain amount of what I want to say, like mental toughness. Like, obviously you got to be resilient, and you can't, you have to be mentally tough. You have to be strong. And but at the same time, I think there's too much of that overly masculine, alpha male sort of attitude, where that's actually showing a lot of weakness. Like, I feel like
Yeah,
I didn't understand that growing up, and it's only been since I've been on this journey the last few years that how important that is to actually to be able to control that, and to be able to understand that overcompensating like that, and having to say how strong you are, how great you are, or bring other people down, is like, it doesn't actually make you look, it doesn't actually make you stronger. And just, I remember in sports, that was always the feeling. And I think you need a certain amount of something like that, but you also need to be able to express yourself to your teammates and your brotherhood or whatever you're playing as to like open up. And I don't think there's enough of that in sports. Like you see a lot of men's groups now, conscious men's groups and brotherhoods and all this kind of stuff, and women have it too, which is really great because they're opening it up to have healthy masculinity. But I would love to see that tied together more into sports, to have that
Yeah.
healthy masculine um, um, manhood started at a younger age.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges is when that isn't opened up, and I've seen this with, guys. I live in a really nice community where we have a great sense of community spirit. We all swim in the cold sea all year round. Um, but I see young guys struggling with masculinity in their early 30s, late 20s. And because it becomes slightly polarized, I've seen them then move to this point where they go off and seek like some kind of extreme level of masculinity because they're trying to identify what does this all mean. And I think we need to cultivate this idea of the balance of the sexes. It's okay to be masculine, it's okay to be feminine too. Let's
Yeah.
just create and cultivate this sense of equilibrium around it, because if we try and feminize men too much, the danger is that they come back later on too masculine, and that's not great.
Mm. Yeah, it's such an interesting conversation. And things have sure shifted over the years. Like lately, I've noticed it as well. Maybe it's because I'm exploring this more, but this isn't something that I would have talked about a few years ago. I would have been like, "What
Oh,
are
but
you
that's
talking
why
about?"
that's why it's important.
Yeah. So what I would love to discuss as well is, obviously you've had quite the transformation. It's incredible, and the different lifestyles and the things you've had to go through in order to get to where you are today. But I would love if you could, for the people first learning about you now, first time, I would love if we could start kind of before, you know, take us back a little bit. Start as early as you feel is necessary at kind of walking us through your story and give us some insight into kind of the before the transformation happened.
Sure. Um, so I grew up in Ireland. So I grew up in Dublin. Um, we were certainly not in any way wealthy. So it was a pretty basic working class environment in Ireland. I went to some pretty rough schools. Grew up in a tough neighborhood, and as growing up, my old man was struggling a lot with mental health, and I grew up at a time when he was institutionalized, when I was like 11, 12 years of age, and that was back in, that would have been the 80s, and nobody told me about it. My mom tried to hide it from me. I had older siblings, but they were like 15 to 20 years older than me. So I was very much isolated and unsure about what was going on. And I learned then at like 15, 16 that my dad was suicidal, and a lot of mental health issues going on. And I had a really challenging relationship with both my parents due to this. And my dad was pretty much absent throughout my childhood. And when he was, available after work, he'd go to bed. He just couldn't cope with life full stop. He was heavily medicated. He had electric shock treatment. So you name it, it was kind of going on. And my mom, is an incredible human being who was trying to hold everything together at the same time and try and make life as normal as possible. But you know, unsurprisingly, that isn't really ever going to work out like that. So I was struggling in school at that stage, and I think it's a valuable thing to recognize that kids who have challenges going on at home will generally be acting out in some way, shape, or form in school. And for me, I was struggling academically. I had dyslexia, which hadn't been diagnosed at that stage anyway, but I also just was not there. I was not able to pay attention. I had no direction. I had no compass at all. Um, and I got an opportunity when I finished school to go and study computer science, because I've been writing code since I was a kid. So I was in trouble. I was, drinking alcohol at a young age, involved in all the kind of stuff that you would not want your kids to be involved in. But I got an opportunity to study computer science, and I went there. But I was only a few months in. Got an opportunity to go and work in a bank. Dropped out of university, and got a transfer to London at 19. So I think I always knew I wanted to get away from everything that I'd grown up around, and I wanted to escape my environment, my parents, but I also wanted to really escape me. I didn't like who I was, or what I was becoming. And when the opportunity presented itself, I took it and I left. And I think I was only reflecting on this the other day. London gave me an opportunity to just reinvent myself, because nobody knew where I was from. In the UK, it's a very much class orientated system and society, but you arrive over there with an Irish accent. They can't place you. They can't say, oh, you went to this school or that university. So all of a sudden, I've got a blank sheet of paper. And I think, all right, I'm going to create something that's, completely different to where I've come from. And I knew I had this desire to be a very determined person. And I'd actually built a couple of businesses in my teenage years. I'd started making money when I was a kid. So London, working in banking, presented opportunities to me. And I had a really great career. In the space of 4 years, I had a couple of promotions. Nobody really knew how old I was. I had a bit of gray hair even in my early 20s. So it gave me a capacity to kind of slip away unnoticed in the context of in kind of age discrimination. So by like 2021, I bought my first apartment in London. I had a lot of money, a lot of success. My ego was colossal. And by the time I was 23, the CEO of the bank told me, look, you've had too many promotions. You got to accept it, kid, that, you're not going to go anywhere for a while now, because, you are too young and you've moved too quickly and yada, yada, yada. And of course, my ego was like, whatever, I'm out of here. So I jacked it in, and set up my own business. So that was a real helter skelter ride, because it was a highly emotive moment to quit. And then all of a sudden you kind of sober up 2 days later and you think, oh my God, where do I go from here? So I went into business with a pal of mine, and we built a company then. There's three of us at the start. We built a company over the next 7 or 8 years, which was huge. We were one of the biggest providers of financial services in the UK. We had 250 people. We had various companies that we either built or acquired. And, we were kind of masters of our universe, filled with ego. We moved into the horse racing world. We were running our own horses at Royal Ascot, with the Queen, with Sheikh Mohammed. It
Wow.
was mental.
Wow.
It kind of paints a bit of a picture there, but all of a sudden I come from, you know near abject poverty to this is situation where, we're at the biggest horse racing events in the world.
Wow.
We're running a business in the UK. We're making obscene amounts of money, and all the things that I thought I needed to get because of how I grew up. And I thought, this is how I'm going to feel happy. But of course, you don't. There's still always a hole left in your heart, and you don't really know how to fill it. And it's always that, when I get this next thing, I'll
Yeah.
be there. But that just didn't really happen. That wasn't happening back then at all.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, to be successful in a place like London, I mean, you've pretty much made it, right? Like, I mean, it's pretty, yeah. And I mean, the ego has got to be massive at that point, because when you grow up with very little, and then you get it at that young age. I mean, all you want to do is spend it, right? Like you want to just have all the things that you didn't have growing up. And
Yeah,
you realize though that's you're just filling a void. You're trying to fill a void. And so many people do that. And so many people, it's like
totally.
we ignore like that feeling inside of us that wants to do more, but we don't really know what that is. We just try and drown it with stuff.
Yeah. And also I think that at that point, and in many ways, look, as entrepreneurs, you often feel that rules are really for everybody else, right? So you're constantly willing to push boundaries at all points. But I always remember a really telling point of my behavior was that it's probably, I don't know, I think I was maybe 24, 25, and I was done for drink driving. I was only marginally over the limit at the time. But I think in many ways, the universe is often trying to, give you a kick in the pants or likely a punch in the head, right? To
Mm.
say, pay attention to your behavior and what's going on. And I remember, having this situation, and in the UK especially, drink driving offence is the first rung on like a criminal record. So you're fingerprinted, they take your DNA, you've got a pretty horrible day in court. And I was in court, and I remember the two cops that stopped me at the time. One of them actually wrote to the court and said, "Look, this guy was one of the most best behaved people we've ever had to arrest, where we had suspicion of alcohol. He was only marginally over the limit. We'd asked for the court to be lenient and all that kind of good stuff." And I'm sitting there going, "Okay, that's great." But it's a mandatory 1-year ban in the UK, so I'm banned from driving for a year.
Wow.
I've got a big fine. It's hugely difficult, and it should be embarrassing as well. But instead of having to struggle, at that stage, my 911 Porsche is in the garage underneath my apartment, and I've got a driver driving me around for a year. So there was times in my life when I needed to really get hold of what was going on, and I needed to take a stance to understand that you cannot just continue to defy everything and believe that you will always get away with it. And I think that was a great moment when I look back and think, why couldn't I have been more humble and really take stock of what is it like to be drinking too much? To think about what's going on. I wasn't drinking every day because I was really focused on my work, and I was a workaholic completely during the week. But then I'd have a blowout at the weekend. And I think for all of us, when we're going through life, there's always signs to tell you that your behavior is not great and you should be paying attention. And if you don't, some other stuff is going to happen later on that's going to even be worse than those events that initially come along.
Yeah, the nudges, the things that come at us that people don't realize that those are the things, those are the signs telling us, but we just ignore them. And they just get the noise, the knock keeps getting louder and louder and louder until something really bad happens, right? And I can relate, in that environment of drinking and toxic lifestyle. It's just like your body is giving you signs all the time too. Like making stupid decisions that can affect your life. And until you ask yourself like what am I actually doing here? Like why am I doing this? Right? Like and some people have to learn the hard way. Like some people do it once and end up in a bad accident, and or some people end up dying or whatever, and then some people get away with it. It's crazy. And like I look back in my life and I'm like, man, I'm so lucky. Like I'm lucky I'm alive because I've done so much stupid shit in those moments that I just, thank God, thank the universe, whatever you want to call it, that I'm alive. And, those are and to be able to look back and just have that as a lesson. Some people don't get that opportunity. right? Some people don't get to see that, and they just constantly ignore these things until it's too late.
Yeah, so much. And there's so much I can be thankful for in my life, but I think to look back at my younger self, lots of times I could have had opportunities to pivot and think differently. And you get away with stuff and you keep going. And you often then start to believe, your own publicity, right? My you know what don't stink here. I'm infallible and nothing is ever going to happen that's going to knock me off sync because everything is going so well. And of course the irony is that I'd run away from so much as a 19-year-old, and then I developed this whole new world that I thought, I have curated this life for myself and it will be as I want it to be. So you really start to buy into that whole idea. And by the time the financial crisis started, I'd exited my business. I got married, so I found my wife, the love of my life, in 2005, and she was definitely the start of giving me a kick in the ass. Like, she didn't even like me when I met her first, and that was a really great way to be, because I needed to be dealt with like all the subtlety of a baseball bat in the face back then. So she certainly had that capacity, and that was a great move, and we were in love, and we were married within 6 months of meeting each other. And I'd never really even been in particularly long, serious relationships at all. Work was my focus all the way through my 20s. Um, and then in 2007, we had our first son, Luca, and that was also a great moment of celebration, but then challenge. We discovered that Luca had cleft lip and palate. We had some scans, and that was our first moment of having to deal with challenge in parenthood, and being in a private hospital in London, and they were talking to us about the fact that termination is possible when kids have challenges, and we're like, well, what kind of challenge do they have? And then they scanned him and they went, oh well, it's cleft lip and palate. And we were like, wow, that's we're very happy with that. We're gonna love him no matter what. But it meant we set off on this journey with Luca to have multiple operations. So in the first year of his life, he had 3 major surgeries, and that's kind of a challenge as a parent.
Yeah.
That's your first step into parenthood, and look, as we'll talk, but we had many more thereafter. But that was really, for me, a moment where I started to shift this idea to, I can't control events. Life is just happening to me now.
Yeah, it's such a, I'm not a parent, but a lot of my friends and, people that I know are, and I can only imagine, what kind of position you would be in, especially when you just have a child and you're still new parents. You still don't know how how the whole thing works yet. Never mind dealing with, you know, challenges like that. And I mean, I don't even like no one really knows the right or wrong way to even react to that, right? Because immediately, we want to protect them, but it's out of our control.
Totally. And but it was also a great moment for me to realize that my life partner was as grounded as I was, in the context of, okay, here's the challenge. We're cool with it. Let's work our way through this. In the first 3 months of his life, we had his first surgery, and we had to wait around while he was in surgery for a couple of hours, and then he had another 2 surgeries over the next 18 months. And these challenges we were meeting head on. We were staying calm. We were staying together. We had a lot of love in our relationship, and that was really positive. But during this time, I was still CEO of my business, and we were still still very much focused on work, but I was starting to realize that there was something a whole lot more important than this. And then when I got an opportunity to sell out of the company, Luca was still quite young, but we'd decided that we wanted to have a second child. So we started working towards that, but we ended up with 4 miscarriages after Luca, and pretty stressful environments, especially for my wife. And it was hard for us generally to try and work towards a second child. It wasn't working out. And we came to a point of sitting down one day and having a tough conversation around the fact that maybe we just need to stop. And my wife's health was being brought into question as well. So maybe we just need to be happy with what we have and just take it as a sign that we can't have more children. So we literally at that moment, I remember having lunch together in a restaurant and saying, okay, look, we've tried our best, but let's just be very happy with what we have. We have a healthy, beautiful boy. Let's stick with that. But little did we know that Beatrice was actually pregnant at that moment when we decided that we were going to stop.
Wow. So what were you going to do differently? Like, what was your plans moving forward? And when you found that out, like, what was going through your mind? Because that's such a emotional roller coaster, because you decide something and then all of a sudden you're surprised again.
Yeah, I
It's
think I think looking back, the trauma of the miscarriages was huge. It really was. It was a lot going on, and I probably wasn't even paying enough attention to all of that at the time because I was super busy running my business. But I really got a sense of the fact that there was more to our life and our relationship than this constant pursuit of having 2 kids. So when we came to the decision of not trying anymore, it was also a relief. It's like everything.
yeah.
We all carry around these huge desires about what we want to do, but eventually when we let go of them, we can often feel a huge sense of relief. So it was definitely a sense of relief. And then when we discovered that she was actually pregnant only a couple of weeks later, um, I probably would say there was a huge sense of anxiety around that because here we go again, and the challenges that we faced before, but this time the pregnancy seemed to be going okay. The 10-week scan was good. Um, the 20-week scan was good, and we thought, okay, maybe this is really going to work for us. And we came to 26 weeks, and we decided that we take vacation, the three of us, just before we get ready to hunker down for the second child. So we went across to Spain. We were from London, and we thought we'd have a week in Spain, take in a bit of sun. It was January. It's like in Canada in January, London in January, right? It's just not the nicest place. So you go south and you get a little bit of sun and you get a bit of a different environment. So that was the plan. And so we set off to Spain, just hoping to be there for a week. And while we were in Spain, I think maybe 3 days in, at 3 o'clock in the morning, Beatrice woke me up, and we were staying in a villa, and said, my waters are broken. And I'll never forget that moment because it made absolutely no sense. Because I thought, your waters can't have broken because you're just coming up to 6 months pregnant. It's just not possible. And then the reality of that suddenly sunk in. And then, of course, you're on vacation, right? But then all of a sudden you have to think, well, actually, where are we? Where are we in relation to cities and hospitals? And we don't even speak Spanish. So our world, really completely turned upside down. And that was January 2010. And what unfolded thereafter was a real tsunami. So we'd had challenges on the way up through our first child, through Luca, and then the miscarriages. But this was a whole new ball game.
Mm. Wow. So after that, walk us through like this. I just feel like the amount of challenge that you go through and what you're telling us is just like it's mind blowing because when it comes to your child, it's just a whole other it's a whole other form of adversity to overcome because it's beside it's not yourself anymore. Like it's another human that you've brought into the world. And I can't even imagine. It's hard for me to put myself in that position, because I don't have a child, but like what were you learning from that? Like what can you, looking back now, you know, how were you changing? Like what were you learning in your life, and like how are you moving forward through that? What are some things that you were doing?
Well, I remember the night before we had dinner in a restaurant. We were sitting in this beautiful square in this little town in Spain. Luca was playing beside us. He was 3 at the time. Beatrice was pregnant at that stage. We were even thinking about buying a place in Spain at that moment, and thinking, well, we could spend half our life here, half our life in the UK, and and I can't remember which one of us said it, but one of us said it to the other one. Life is so great at the moment. It's just everything that you want it to be, and I think those are the kind of words that you just should not utter. It's just be thankful for what's
Mm,
going on in the moment, but don't just believe that you've hit that panacea. And I think the nature of the challenges that we had through the initial issues with Luca, with cleft lip and palate, and then the miscarriages, and now this with Joshua. um, I was very much starting to question how I was going to be. Could I cope with all this? Because I'd led
yeah.
this really charmed life all the way through my 20s, where it was the perfect kind of bachelor playboy life. It was great, and now all of a sudden, I'm in the middle of this storm, and we're stuck in Spain. We know nobody. We're on vacation for a week, and we have to try and find a maternity hospital. I mean, that was 180, 190 kilometers from where we were. So we're panicking, but trying to figure out how do we stay calm, how do we keep a 3-year-old in good shape. And I think the good thing is that I'd managed businesses and companies and private equity transactions, and I've been in all kinds of chaos from a business standpoint over the years in my career, that I was able to adapt to this being a crisis. And my wife Beatrice is hugely level-headed as well, so we were able to keep our cool and eventually get to a hospital. And then once we got to a hospital, they checked her. They could see that yes, the waters had broken, and they said, "Look, we can stabilize hopefully her and the baby, but you guys aren't going anywhere." And they went like, "Not at all until this baby arrives. She can't even fly, and what we have to try and desperately do now is prolong labor as much as possible so that we can try and hopefully get the lungs into good enough shape before this baby's delivered." And so our life was on hold. We're in Malaga, then in the south of Spain,
I've
and
been
and
there.
we've got to live there until we figure out what happens next.
Mm. So yeah, I've been there. So how hard was it with the language barrier, with people speaking? Like how that must have been very, very challenging.
Oh, man, it was so hard. I mean, it was. My wife is German, and she speaks French and English superbly well. She speaks a bit of Italian, so she could kind of muster her way through a little bit. When you're an English speaker, you kind of take it for granted that everybody's going to figure out
Oh,
how to deal
totally.
with you. So I was screwed.
That's the way it is. That's what I tell people as well. Like when you go travel, if you haven't traveled overseas or to countries that don't speak English, that's when you really realize, you go, oh shit, okay, I really appreciate being able to communicate with people and people that speak my language. And it just makes us, it made me feel so ignorant when I went to Europe, especially because everybody could speak like 6 languages. And I'm like, I can only speak English. It's
Yeah, but
crazy,
the
right?
Irish and English, we're the same, right? We don't
Totally.
speak languages,
Yeah, totally.
but the rest of Europe, yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
amazing
yeah.
how different that is. So, okay, you're in Spain. Walk us through this, and I would love to get to the point where you were just to the point where you completely changed your direction. Like how much further along, and walk us through the path from where you are now to there, and kind of some of the things that were brewing through your mind about everything in your life. And because you're starting to get these feelings of, they're starting to surface, you're probably thinking, is what I'm doing really what I want to be doing? Like, walk us through your thought process a little bit of the next little while.
Sure. Um, so yeah, so we're stuck in Spain. They'd hope to kind of keep her in as good a shape as possible, but it didn't happen. And within a couple of weeks, Beatrice started bleeding. They had to perform an emergency cesarean, which was completely chaotic. And not having the language, I lost her in the hospital for hours, and nobody could even tell me where she was or understand what was going on or who I was.
Mhm.
So it was like your worst nightmare coming to life. And then our son Joshua was delivered by emergency cesarean. He was tiny. I mean, literally, he could just fit into the
Yeah.
center of my palm. He was weighing less than a kilo. Because I've lived with a German for so long now, I'm kind of not in the imperial system anymore. But he was tiny, and he was given no hope at birth. And they kind of said to us, look, if he makes it 24 hours or 48 hours, that'll be a miracle. But he did, and he made it for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and then they started to think, okay, there's hope here, and he survived, and he stayed in neonatal intensive care for 6 months. So we had to give up our life and live in Spain, and we moved around different houses because we were trying to figure out how do we get somebody to take care of Luca, because we need to keep life balance for him. One of us had to be in hospital every day, so we were swapping time so that both of us would be with each one of our children to try and keep some balance in our life. Luca couldn't see his brother because it was a neonatal intensive care unit, so that wasn't possible. Um, so that journey was unbelievably intense, and I was probably coming close to my faith at that time, and thinking about what was going on there. I was brought up as a Catholic, so I
Mhm.
was I remember having daily conversations with God, saying, "Look, if you get us through this, I'll do whatever you want." Um, and you go to whatever level you need to try and get through this. But it was hugely challenging. There was days when I would be lying on the floor in the shower, crying my eyes out, and Beatrice would step up and take control of the situation and be the strong parent. And then there'd be days when she's lying on the floor crying her eyes out too. So that was all really tough. Um, and then that culminated at a point where after 6 months, we got Joshua out of neonatal intensive care. We got him into our care. We became his carers, provided we could live within 2 kilometers of the hospital. And it started to look like we were going to be able to transport him back out of Spain. And we kind of got all of the ducks in a row to do that. But he was tube fed, he was oxygen dependent, he had to come back by air ambulance. But we were ready to do whatever we had to do. And then on Christmas Eve in 2010, in our care, he started to struggle really badly again. So we would have his oxygen at home, and we were sustaining a lot of his medical issues. We couldn't keep him in good shape. We brought him back to the maternity hospital, and they they had to put him back on life support, which was the fourth time he'd been on life support. And after they put him back on, the medical team who were there said, look, it's Christmas Eve. We don't know you guys. If your normal medical team were here, they would have actually not proceeded with putting him back on life support, because the fourth time round, it's not viable. His life is not going to be able to be sustained like this. We know your story. We know you guys have been here in Spain. You're stuck here. And we know how much you tried to try and get through this and to keep your son alive, but it's going to have to stop now. So we had to kind of give up on Joshua, which was hugely challenging. And we then fought a battle over the next few days to get him back into our care, because we wanted to have the palliative care in our control. He'd been hospitalized so many times in his life. So we got him released into our care, and he lived for another 2 weeks, which was really nice because we got him at home. We'd never even seen him without tape across his face, holding all his tubes in place and everything else. We got to take the tape off. We got to see him for who he was. We got to turn off the heart monitors, all the things that were there to try and keep him alive. And we had a beautiful 2 weeks together as a family. My parents were there. Beatrice's mom was there. And he died with us peacefully at home. And it was a really nice way to end a hugely stressful period. It was, when I look back at it, it was a great period of our life. But I suppose for me, a lot of the big challenges arrived thereafter, because we were incredibly mindful of each other during that period of time. We were close as a family. We spent so much time together. We were always with one of our children every day. Work and all that kind of stuff took a back seat for that year. So after we had Joshua's funeral, within I think maybe 10 days, I started to set up a new company. I was, petitioning shareholders, looking at people to come on my board. And I really wanted to kind of flex my business muscles and kind of show everybody, you know what, I've been through this really tough challenge, but I'm back, and I'm coming at it stronger than ever, and I'm going to build something great. And within weeks of his death, I'm flying around the world, and life is full on again, which is just not the way that you need to grieve.
Because you were probably just trying to mask the pain a little bit, right? And just kind of avoid dealing with the root of it, probably, I would think.
Totally.
I mean,
it's
easy to stay busy and not think about, and not, face the shadow, which, is there, which the dark side, which losing somebody. I mean, there's no rule book on how to grieve. Sometimes people get busy in work or whatever, toxic habits.
Yeah, totally. And my toxic habit was work. I was a workaholic, and so I just, it was like, take the needle and stick it back in the arm. And I did, and at the same time, my wife was walking every day with our golden retriever in the mountains, and just coming to terms with the loss of a child. But I ended up kind of burying it, and you force this traumatic memory into the back of the mind. And I've gone on to study so much of the neuroscience, and it's interesting because we see these events as binary, and the mind registers them, and it says, is this a threat to life, or is it okay? Once it goes, it's a threat to life, as in a threat to your homeostasis. It fires it into the back of this kind of suppressed traumatic memory. So the only time I'd ever really be challenged with it was, I always remember, like, when the planes are taking off and landing, and you're not allowed to wear headphones, you're not allowed to look at your phone, you're not allowed to do anything. I would literally have flashbacks of Joshua's death and the reality of losing a child right at those moments. And then all the other time, I would just try and escape it. And before you know where you are, as the months roll on, alcohol was helping me escape, work was helping me escape. It's just a toxic sense of behavior. and it all had to come to a head. And also behaviors that were not in great shape prior to becoming a father were now back into full tilt again. And I was running the risk of ending up being a bad father and not being around for my kids. So within two years of that, I just started to feel unwell, and not consciously aware of it. But I remember being in a really important meeting. We had some clients over from Dubai and the US. I'm closing a deal, and I'm sitting there, and there's a bunch of people sitting around our boardroom, and I started to think I'm having like a heart attack or a stroke. I don't really know which it is, and I'm kind of feeling my heart, and then feeling a pulse in my neck, but also conscious that I need to get what's in front of me out of the way. And I thought, well, I don't think it's like a full heart attack or a full stroke, because all that had happened so far was my periphery vision had turned off. I could feel kind of cold sweats, and my heart felt like it was going to pop out of my mouth. But I thought I can still get through this deal and get this done, and then I'll figure out what's wrong with me. So I went on for like another 45 minutes with something that was probably at that moment in time going to kill me, if it had been what I thought it was. But of course, as it transpired later on, it was an anxiety attack. It was a panic attack. But like, it's just that
Scary.
just sums up how stupid my behavior was, though. And I actually thought, well, I'll just push through it, no matter what it is. I'm just going to push through it, and let's get this done.
Anxiety attacks are scary, especially if you've had the first time you have one. If you've never had one and it comes up, I remember I had one and I had no idea what it was. You feel like your heart is going like a heart attack. You feel like you're gonna pass out. You feel like you're gonna die. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. And like, I had never thought I didn't even know what anxiety was until I had that. And then after, I was like, I get it now. And that has been embedded in my brain too over the years, is that feeling. And that anxiety is scary stuff when it hits you like that. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it
it's a
is.
real shocker because you don't know what it is until you feel something. You don't know what it is. You hear the buzzwords, but like, I don't know about you, but like, did you have anxiety before that, or was that sort of like something that sort of was like kind of everything crashing down on you at one time?
I think maybe in the kind of weeks leading up to it, I'd started to feel it, but I
Mm.
hadn't really been able to articulate what it was.
Yeah.
Um, but not at any great shakes at all. And then all of a sudden this was full on. But it's always interesting, it's something that I've always looked back at with great interest, because
Mhm.
most people, when they get anxiety attacks, are able to talk to people, or seek help or do something about it, right? And think, oh, I need to research this. I'm in like this really important meeting, so I actually just stayed with it, and it was a great lesson that I could revert back to later on, and that is, if you just really lean into your anxiety and just push through it, you will come out the other side. And that's actually what happened that day. I'm not advocating that that's the policy that people should take, but it also showed me that, this thing can't actually kill you, but it is desperately unpleasant. Um, and yeah, really, in the kind of weeks afterwards, I knew I needed to get help, and I was becoming very self-aware of the fact that I'd grown up with my own father and all his struggles with his mental health, and I didn't want to be that kind of dad to my other son. So I needed to get help. I'd spoken to my wife about it, which is so important. Like, when people are facing challenges, you've got to speak to your nearest and dearest, or your friends, or if you don't have the capacity to do that, just go and get help. Don't hold on to stuff because you think nobody else understands. Um, so I literally started to find some help. I didn't want to go medicated because my old man had been medicated heavily all the way through his life. So I wanted to try and find some alternative therapies. I found a psychologist in New York who was quite famous for working on this, and I was getting ready to get out there and meet him. And then I discovered an Indian psychologist working in Ireland who basically offered the the same system. And I had a call with him, and I was going to start working with him. And I remember it was a Sunday after I started this call with him. And it was a Sunday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table in our house, and away from like the challenges that were going on in my head, we had all the things that everybody would want and think that makes them happy. But I started to feel really, really miserable, and then all of a sudden, this deep desire to just escape it all, and suicide started to really rear its head. As I'd had flushes and flashes of it in my mind in the weeks and probably 2 months leading up to this. But then I really started to have this sense of everybody would just be so better without me. I'm actually the problem in all of this. And my son will find a better father, and my wife will find a better husband, and I would be able to turn off the noise, because at this point the voices in my head, the negativity was just relentless. Um, so much so that I had this like they call them boom headaches, where you actually wake up and it sounds like a sonic boom goes off in your head.
Wow.
uh, and because of the intensity of the self-talk, the negative self-talk, so it really come to that point where I thought, I just want to check out. I have to get away from all of this. And I had the sense to text my psychologist and tell him this. And he said to me, okay, he said, don't do anything between now and tomorrow morning. Get to my office. We're going to start working straight away. And ultimately he saved my life, because it was a pretty horrendously dark moment. And Lance, I know you've had your challenges with suicide too, and it's nonsensical. um but it's the moment of the decision, or the opportunity to find somebody to seek help. How does that happen? How did I decide to at that moment to try and get help? And if I didn't have 2 days previously time with Dr. Chada, would I have reached out to him? I couldn't talk to my wife about it, because
Mm.
it just feels so horrible to tell people that you think they're better off without you. It's horrendous.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason that guilt is that you don't want to put that on them. It's we don't want to say that because it almost like it makes them feel uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah,
Like, oh,
yeah,
I want to just keep it to myself because then otherwise it's going to mean they're going to make a big deal out of it and da 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 da. Like that's what goes through. I think that's what goes through everybody's head. I think everybody has had those thoughts at some point. I've talked about this a lot lately. So many people have had those suicidal thoughts in their lives. And I think people are just afraid to talk about. I think it's normal though. I'm realizing it. I think it really is part of our psyche to have these crazy thoughts sometimes. And it's okay, right? But it's like if you need to talk about it, we should like that's where we got to get to the place of, and that's why conversations like this are important, because if you do have those thoughts and it is getting it obviously there's like thoughts, or there's like thoughts where it's taking over, like the fact to be able to just say, look, it's okay to bring it up to somebody that we're close to. That's the point where we need to get to as a society. It's like it's all right if you're feeling bad, if you're feeling like you're going to do something like that, just talk to somebody. No one's going to judge you, you know? And to get to that place where everyone's comfortable, I think is where we want to be. But I get it. Like I would imagine, I mean, you don't want to, you probably just didn't want to put your wife in that position either, or anybody close,
yeah.
right? Like
And
it's,
that's the thing. I think it's you kind of nailed it there. In many ways, it's almost like the mind of somebody who's struggling at that moment with intense mental illness. Like you're at the absolute limit of your capacity to cope, and you almost want to kind of check out quietly. I don't want to disturb you with my problems, and you're not able to see past what am I leaving behind. Like what I'm actually going to leave behind is extraordinarily horrendous for everybody. But yet you don't want to trouble them in that moment. And it's that, I can deal with this myself. I'll plan it, I'll figure out how to do it. They'll be all better off without me anyway. um and if you were just able to speak about it and realize that, I think I remember reading the statistics on men especially. It is something crazy like 60 to 70% of men have had suicidal thoughts throughout their life. And I think it's quite normal that at times we'll have this feeling, but in the whole mental health awareness thing, it's when that moves to the point of planning, it's
Oh
a whole
yeah.
different ballgame.
Yeah. 60 to 70% I feel like is low though. I mean, from when we're a kid to now, I mean, I find it hard to believe that like every teenager or everybody that's grown up or at some point hasn't had some sort of thought, you know? And it's like I think it's the reason people just don't say they have. They say, "Oh no, I've never had that." It's like it's almost like normal. It's almost normal for a teenager going through stuff to think, "Huh, would it be better without me here?" I mean, it's hard for me to believe that we at one time all of us didn't, and that's it's crazy to think about. But I mean, it's almost it's. But you're right. I think when it becomes a thought, when you start to take it the next, when you start to put more energy into the planning of it, that's a whole other path, right? But like the thought itself, it's like, yeah, it's crazy, but so common.
Yeah, but it's funny when you say that the percentage is low. You're probably right. And like as a coach and therapist, it never ceases to amaze me that I'll often, if I speak to a group of people, or even if I'm speaking with clients on a one-on-one basis, I'll talk about the voices in our head, the stories that we tell ourselves. It never ceases to amaze me that some people say, "What voice in your head?" I don't have a voice in my head. So I think we don't realize that we might have these suicidal thoughts, but a lot of people don't even realize that they have a voice in their head. They don't
Yeah,
realize that
that's
there is
true.
their narrator who is, sitting there kind of flicking through the book of their life, telling them how they should feel and how they should behave. And
Mhm.
this autopilot is on all the time. So I think if you look at those studies around men or women who have suicidal thoughts, the big question is, how aware are the people who are answering the question in the context of understanding their mind before they're able to actually speak about how they feel? And most of us are kind of numb or asleep in the context of what's going on in our mind. And it only comes to the fore when a traumatic event or a significant issue really, boom, blows us into some point of trying to think, I don't feel well, or I can't cope, or whatever else. But up until that point, we're ignoring so much of what's happening.
That's such a great point as well. You're so right. I think it's when you get to the level of being able to watch your thoughts and be able to be aware, it's a whole other it's a lot easier to unpack what those things are. So for me to say that, that's only for me to say because I've done the work now and like realized what's actually happening. But you're absolutely right. A lot of people aren't in that place yet where they even know what's going on. It's all grouped together in this chaos,
Yeah.
right? It's not like I can compartmentalize like different things now because I've learned. And it's you're right. I guess it really depends on where people are at, and it's they don't even really realize it. So it's hard for me to put myself in the position of that because I knew when I was younger, I had no idea about like what was going on. And it wasn't until later on where I started to watch my thoughts and to get into stillness, which I want to get in with you as well with Buddhism and everything. It's like that's when I started to realize what was actually happening, which led to more compassion for myself, right? And when you're like, you can probably speak to this as well, is that when you get still, it allows you to quiet down and observe these things, and you realize you're not your thoughts. You're you, and it's love. It's like it's a powerful energy. And once you get to that point where you can watch these crazy things happen, and you understand a little bit more of like how crazy our mind is. You kind of, it's almost like it becomes humorous at some of the thoughts that you observe, right? Like, walk us through that a little bit, and your kind of your transformation into Buddhism and mindfulness and all this, because this has been such a huge part of my life, and meditation. And I actually remember one of my first books, I read like a beginner Buddhism book, and this was when I read The Power of Now, like probably 2014. And it was really interesting because it got the wheels moving, it got them turning. And meditation in my life and just that real mindfulness has been an absolute game changer. Walk us through that with you and how that has been for your life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, when I was reading up on you and checking out the podcast, I could see meditation coming up, and also, look, it brings a great sense of awareness. And I think as a podcast host, it's a fantastic tool because you're able to be comfortable in stillness. You're able to be comfortable with the capacity and space to listen to people, which is kind of key, right? But I think for me, at the point when I arrived there, people who knew me prior to my journey into the whole world of recovery from mental health, and then B, meditation and Buddhism, would have never guessed in a million years that I could go there. But I love that expression, in stillness we find our true self, and that for me was really what happened. So my therapist, my psychologist, Dr. Pradeep Chadha, developed his own methodology of teaching and recovery called subjective emotive brief therapy. And really what that's about is it's about using imagery, your own mind and your own thoughts with your eyes closed, to come to terms with the traumas in your life, get close to them, really lean into them, and actually start to see them for what they are. And this goes back to this whole idea of, what doesn't kill me will make me stronger. So the recovery part, and within my process with my therapist was working on the traumas. So losing Joshua being one of them, but then kind of going back and dealing with problems growing up as a kid, and dealing with seeing my dad in pretty bad shape, and the challenges of my life growing up. And then I lost my nephew probably 8 years before we lost Joshua, and he was only 18 months old. So that was really traumatic to lose my nephew, and my family would be quite close. And then I was hit with losing my own child, which was, of course, one of my biggest fears after watching my sister lose her son. But I needed to just step in and step close and be part of these, and start to own the trauma, and start to see the moment of Joshua's death. And part of the therapy is taking that traumatic memory that's filed in the back of your mind, where, as I said earlier on, it would reappear at moments when I couldn't distract myself. So, the moment on the plane when you can't use headphones or whatever, boom, the traumatic memory comes up, and it's like a flashback out of a movie. But instead, by leaning into it and doing the work, which I did in therapy with my eyes closed, and bringing the imagery of seeing Joshua's final moments, you're able to move that traumatic memory and refile it in the same memory bank as last Christmas or last year's summer holiday, so that you can recall it without feeling the stress in the body. And you like Eckhart Tolle, so the pain body is what this is all about. So by refiling the memory and bringing it into the point of understanding that Joshua's death has happened, and I cannot change that. That is part of my life. It's part of my being. But equally, it can't do any more to me now than it did to me when he died 10 years ago. So I must be able to try and come close to it and see it for what it is. And the freedom that started to bring was incredible. And then I went through the other traumatic memories and other issues in my life that had cultivated this intense anxiety, which brought me to the point of feeling like suicidal. Um, and that was a beautiful experience. And all the way through that, I was learning to meditate. So whilst you're in therapy, the other part of the process is that you must be meditating every day. So you start with small little processes to teach you how to meditate. So when you're in therapy and you're doing the hard work, it's akin to, if therapy is, in a baseball analogy, and you're in batting practice, you're in therapy for an hour where you're getting a lot of work around how to hold a bat, how to position your feet, how to move your body properly. But when you're outside of therapy, you've got to still keep hitting the ball yourself. So the whole idea of the meditation along with the therapy is that you're doing the work on yourself every single day, so that when you're back in therapy and you're doing the deep work for an hour, it's not just once every 2 weeks. You're actually slowly working on yourself. You're slowly just deeping, stepping inside yourself, unwinding, unraveling, releasing the pain body. Um, so we did that for 3 months, and my life changed, and I found meditation, and I moved on a path of spirituality, and I started to discover Buddhism, and went on some incredible retreats and trained with Zen um, masters in Buddhism, and then trained in master training with Yamabushi monks in Japan. And
Wow.
all of this was going on for me, but I also knew I needed to get out of financial services. I needed to get out of private equity. I needed to change my life. So I said to my therapist at the time that I wanted him to become my teacher. So I became his novice in this whole world of subjective emotive brief therapy. And I said, look, this is what I want to do. I want you to show me how you've helped me, because this is mind blowing. And I studied with him for 2 years, and then rocked up in a board meeting and told my shareholders and my board that I was selling, I wanted out, and they all thought I was going to go and set up a competitor. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go and become a therapist and a coach.
Wow. What did they say when you decided to get out? Like, what was the reaction? Did you tell them you're gonna be like? Did you tell them what you were doing, or did you just say, I'm out of here. I got other plans." How did that work?
Yeah, I did. I told them. You know, one of my board members, and a shareholder, was a really good friend of mine. We're still friends now. Um, but for everybody at that moment, it was a challenge.
Mm.
I stopped drinking alcohol 4 years ago. I found Buddhism, and this was 2 years after my therapy. But I found Buddhism. I stopped drinking alcohol. I became a vegan. I was meditating every day. I found cold water swimming all the way throughout the year. So I'm like so far removed away from the world that they all lived, which was, champagne and foie gras and
Yeah.
truffles and all that kind of stuff. Right? I'm a million miles from it. So it was jarring for everybody who was involved in the business and everybody who was involved with me. um, but as time has gone on, we're all still friends, and some of them have faced challenges and they've lost loved ones along the way, and eventually some people who think you're a complete lunatic on the back of not drinking alcohol, finding Buddhism, talking about spirituality, meditating every day of the week, swimming in cold water, being vegan. But then everybody has their events, and this. I mean, the University of Adversity, people think that they can escape it, but it comes for everybody.
Yeah.
So, and then you start to think, oh yeah, what about that guy who went through all that stuff and lost his son, and how did he pull his shit together?
Yeah.
Maybe I should go back and check that out.
That is so true. People will watch, people will judge, they'll ridicule, and they'll be the ones that'll be your biggest fans later when they need, when they're, because it's coming for them. You're right. It's coming for them. And if you think about how crazy that is, thinking that connecting and doing Buddhism and, things that have been 1,000-year-old practices and connecting with nature, people think that's crazy. Yet, like, drinking a poison that makes you pretty much like goof around and dance around, that really desensitizes all your feelings and then eating things that people are just unconscious and doing all these behaviors is normal, smoking cigarettes, this like craziness, drinking like Coca-Cola. Like, think how crazy that is, really. Think about some of the activities that people do that are normal. Like, it's insane. I think about it too. I spent so many years in the bars, and I've been back and forth off the sober train for a while, and it's been something that's challenged me. But if you think about a room full of people drinking, like, and what is actually going on there, and you were looking down on us humans on the earth, that would be such a ridiculous thing to see. Like, the stuff that we do as humans is so insanely ridiculous, yet it's normalized. And then somebody like yourself that's connecting to something that is so deep spiritual, to nature, to being conscious about how you eat, is considered like a crazy act. Like, it's everything is so backwards. Like, it blows my mind. It blows my
Yeah.
mind.
It's but the people who are drinking the Coca-Cola, who are immersing themselves in food or alcohol, or certainly something I've come across a lot in the last few years, working with clients in therapy, is pornography, online pornography. It's
Big
really
time.
taken off. That people are just anything that you can go to get dopamine hits that allow you to not have to face into who you are, the core of your being. So alcohol, drugs, pornography, gambling, food, sex, it's all there, right? And the harsh reality of wellness, and wellness always sounds like a kind of a super soft, cuddly kind of thing. And one of the things I've learned, and especially spending time with the Yamabushi, who are a kind of a derivative of the samurai, in a remote part of Japan, in the Shanai Mountains. And when I did my master training with the Yamabushi, it was harsh. We
Mm.
were doing spiritual work, but in extreme circumstances, and they believe that the nature of the human being and healing is just found within nature. It's the harmony of the interconnection of us as a human being, and realizing that within the sense of this Gaia, the world as it is one being organism. And when we move away from this sense of the importance of me, and accept that the tree is as important as I am, as is the flowers and the squirrels, there's a release. But we do this training in an incredibly intense way, and what they're really teaching us is that the path to good health, to wellness, is consistency in the context of showing up for yourself every day and having those practices. So, you know, meditation is hard, right? It's hard to get into, and it's hard to sustain, but it's a cornerstone of my life. But then it's, right after that, I'm in the cold water, and I'm swimming, and then I'm exercising every day, and I'm either in kickboxing classes, or I'm doing Pilates, or I'm running. I know that the whole idea of sustaining this being is not just one thing, and sleep, massively important. So we start to realize that wellness is not some kind of soft and fluffy thing, like go to a yoga class once a week and you're going to feel okay. We have a responsibility to take ownership of our lives. We have to become our own leaders, because there's nobody else coming to save us, right? This is our life. We have to step up and take control, be our own leaders, and find the pathway out, and then put those building blocks together. And I know when I've heard you speaking before, Lance, you talk about this too, but it's not just one thing that keeps us in good shape.
No, yeah, it's a bunch of things. Yeah, you're totally right. And the consistency, and I've heard you say that a couple times now, is so important, right? Especially with meditation. Would you say that is more important because some people will meditate? I'll even do it myself. And this is a prime example. I'll meditate a half an hour. I love a half an hour, but then I'll miss a day, and then, I won't do it, and I'll get out of the rhythm. What is more important, doing 5 minutes consistently every day, or doing a half an hour one day, and then, missing a day, and then maybe doing it like would you say that every single day, and I know the answer, is going to be more powerful than like trying to do these big meditations and missing a day?
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the answer to every question in the context of personal development is always the toughest one, right?
Yeah,
You know,
so true.
we all really kind of want the blue pill that's going to fix everything, or, you know, how do I get the Kool-Aid and that's just going to fix me? The 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 reality of sustaining ourselves, my mantra is wake up, show up for yourself every day, do the work every day, and then repeat it the next day. You know, and it's and that sounds harsh, but it's also just doing stuff that you enjoy. So, you know, enjoy your sport, enjoy your, you know, your swimming if you like it, enjoy your meditation, find all these things that are part of it. But the studies that we have, and you know, thankfully through the work of the likes of John Kabat-Zinn, who created mindfulness-based stress reduction, which becomes this global school of meditation, means that we have some really great clinical studies on the benefits of meditation. And the one thing that comes up consistently in these studies, and there was one study, I think it was Oxford University, carried out a study of um, physicians. I think they were in the final year of med school, and they carried out a study to identify the benefits of 5 minutes of meditation a day, and they could already show on the MRI scans the improvement of their well-being and the feedback questionnaires. So it's what I would always say to people is don't set the bar high. You know, it's like people decide they want to go running, right? I know what I'm going to do. I want to run 15 miles. You know, start with a mile. And if you
Mm.
want to learn how to meditate, find a way to do it. You know, even find a local class. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is a great resource that people will find in their locality anywhere around the world. But find a way and a pathway towards it, and start slow. Don't you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Don't start with, you know, I'm going to be on top of a mountain meditating as the sun sets. Do it small. Ideally start in the morning. James Clear has a great book, you probably read it, called Habit Stacking. I love that idea, and I use that a lot with my own clients and the courses that I put together. And I always say to people, meditate after you brush your teeth. You know, we know from the neuroscience that the myelin and the synapses in the brain are already there for us to brush our teeth. So put a new habit on the back of an old habit. So when you start meditating right after you brush your teeth, and you can stick a little postie on your mirror in the bathroom saying meditate. So you're kind of brushing on, oh yeah, I got to do that. That habit stacking means that the synapses form quicker. So the meditation steps in quicker. And then it also brings on the analogy for me that I work with people on. And I say, by doing that, within kind of 6, 8, 10 weeks of consistently maintaining it, you get the same sensation at 3 o'clock in the day. If you haven't brushed your teeth, you know, you've got that kind of furry feeling across the front of your teeth. You start to get a furry feeling across the front of your brain because you think, well, oh, I didn't meditate today. So it really has so many great connections to start it in the morning time and build it within an established habit.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting to be able to stack those habits in a way that works for us. Sometimes the simplicity is what matters, you know, and we try to overcomplicate it. You know, I wanted to ask you as well, is that I've talked about nutrition on here a lot, and you're you're a big proponent of the vegan diet, and you look very healthy, and you have very active. So I'm
It's a
fascinated.
good filter on the camera.
Well, no, this is the thing, and I love to see. I know you're friends with Rich Roll, and he thrives on this diet, and I love hearing the different stories. And how have you been, like, how was that more of a spiritual thing, a change for your diet, or is that, do you physically, how do you feel on it, and how has that changed your direction as far as, mind, body, spirit, everything? Because I haven't discussed this lately in a while. There's been a lot of other conversations about people that are for the meat and all that. So I love to talk about the opposite side of it, because I'm always just so curious, right? So walk us through how that's been for you as well.
Sure. So look, for me, I grew up in Ireland, and meat and dairy is just so important. I mean, even
Yeah.
probably more so than you would have in many other countries in Europe.
Yeah.
Um, and for me to go vegan, I couldn't possibly even comprehend that that would have ever happened. But I ended up on a retreat with Rich Roll and his wife Julie, I'd already started to play around with the idea of less meat, and really this was kind of 5 years ago. I was training a lot. I was trying to get my body firmer and healthier and stronger and all that kind of stuff. And I started to stumble into this whole idea of the recovery of your muscles and post workout stuff can feel better by removing anything that's got toxins. So I started to cut a lot of stuff out, and then I did some allergy tests, and I discovered that I was allergic to dairy and I was allergic to eggs. So I
Mm.
cut them out of my diet, and then all of a sudden you take out dairy and eggs, and you're kind of heading down that path anyway. So I took out meat, and probably within kind of 10 to 14 days after that, I don't know. I felt different. And I have no problem with people who eat meat at all. And I certainly wasn't doing it at that moment in time out of any sense of a spiritual sense. And I was only really discovering Buddhism in its purest sense at that moment too. And a lot of Buddhists, are playing around with vegetarianism and everything else. You don't have to become vegan. But I started to really experiment a lot around the neuroscience, the nutrition, everything that I was building for what I wanted to work with clients and on the coaching front and speaking front. I wanted to really cultivate the best of myself that I could really then talk to other people about. And nutrition became huge. So I then went full tilt into veganism. Um, and I started to lose weight. My skin changed, my complexion improved. People were actively noticing it, and I felt more alive and more energetic. And then I developed this huge empathy over the course of the next few months for animals and for the nature of what we're doing to the planet. And then as I went on to study with the Yamabushi in Japan, and I started to really connect into this sense of nature and our responsibility to everything around us, it all had a big interplay. But principally, it was just simply around, can I run faster? Will it help my fitness? And will I recover quicker from injury? And it ticked all those boxes. So I was full on, and I've always been, I talked about my career in the past. Once I decide to do something, I'm kind of full tilt into it, and let's see how this really goes. Like, let's really go for it, and dial it up to 100%. And so I did that with vegan lifestyle, plant based living, and veganism. It's a polarizing word. People see it in many different ways, but really for me, it was a case of just taking care of myself from a nutritional standpoint. And my wife went on the same journey, and then she went off and became a nutritional expert in plant-based food, and then trained as a vegan chef. So that was quite cool too. So we were
Cool.
we were taking care of it from a food perspective.
Mm. Yeah, I love it. I find it very interesting, because I think diet and nutrition is such a personal experience. I think everyone is different. And I think that's the game too, the journey. It's like you got to try it all. You got to figure out, what feels right to you. What, spiritually, physically, all of it. I think and nobody can really tell anybody how that is for them. And I'm learning that with myself. It's like everybody can say don't do this, don't do that, but until you feel it yourself and understand what it's like, it's hard to understand the truth of it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And if you look at Rich and Rich's podcast, and Rich and Julie are really dear friends of mine.
Yeah.
And I think so much of Rich often gets caught into this whole idea of him being vegan. But you look at his podcast and the diversity of people that
It's
he has on
unbelievable.
there.
It's
It's
unbelievable.
unbelievable, right? So,
Yeah.
he's okay. He's
He
not
sets the
Joe
bar
Rogan, but
high. Oh, he's
his
getting there.
he's getting there, right? But yet it's what actually was the thing that catapulted him into the world. Sometimes it starts to become his Achilles heel, because we live in this polarized society. You're pro-Trump, you're anti-Trump,
Yeah.
you're pro-mask, you're anti-mask, you're pro-vegan, you're anti-vegan. We all just want to take a camp, and then once you're in that camp, everybody who's in the other camp, they're so wrong.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I know. That's exactly what happens. And that's why I really want to stay neutral with everything. I like to be curious. I like to learn from people. I'm like, hey, like you may do well with this, you may not. But like for me, I've fallen into that thing too where we want to talk to more people that align with what we believe, our confirmation bias. It's like, oh no, I want to unfollow everybody that doesn't believe what I believe. That is dangerous. We need to
Totally.
challenge our beliefs. We need to challenge people. Like somebody that thinks complete opposite, I want to learn about that. I want to know, why do you think like that? That's interesting, because you are a human with an opinion and a story, and you think like that, so there's a reason, and that's interesting to me. And like I think that's where we need to be as human beings, is curious and accepting for people. Because the minute we want to like shut down and cancel everybody because they have a different opinion, is where this all is unfolds. You're right. Like vegan meat, Trump, Biden, like it's just ridiculous. It's divides, and it's like everybody wants to be part of this side and then turn it into a bully. And it's like our own teenager self becoming bullies again. It's like so many hurt children. Essentially, it's our inner child. So many people are hurt on the playground, and they just want to bully the other kid. That's what it is. We're all just adults or just grown up kids. It's like
Totally.
it's so toxic. And you're right. And I think it's just, I always want to stay really like curious and accepting of people, because everybody has a different opinion on everything, and it's not up to us to choose what's right or wrong. It's just up to us to be who we are and our truth. And I guess when people see that, they decide just by looking at you and seeing your life that they want to have more of that. It's like just being your truth and yourself is what really makes people want to change, right? It's
Yeah.
standing in your
And
power.
I think it's getting people not to want to be like me or like you or like Rich Roll, or getting people to just get to a point where they can sit with themselves in a quiet room for 20 minutes and just journal out, where is my life right now? What's working well and what's not working so well? And then within the what's not working so well stuff, what work could I do on myself? What parts of this could I change? And especially if that's the voices in our heads, the negative self-talk that we're delivering to ourselves. I'm not good enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not attractive enough. I'll never be that person. I'll never get that job. And starting to realize that that voice isn't you, and you have got the capacity to change that sound, that voice. It's a constant record that's playing over and over again, like a record. I'm so old now, but like it's an MP3. It's just this recurring thing that's happening, and you just got to get in there and change it. So identifying things that you can do in your life is the first step, and then planning around it. And it's not going to be easy, but doing it in small bites. How do I eat an elephant one bite at a time? The value and the output and the end game is there for you. And for me, I live a life that's fulfilled. I don't have any regrets that Joshua died, because I couldn't control that. I have hugely fond memories of the year that we had together. I have great love for my family. I still have to challenge myself. I still have to deal with myself all the time. I'm a very driven, determined person. So I have to kind of slow down a little bit. Mel Robbins has that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, when we're caught in procrastination. For people who are like A-type personalities, it can be the other side. And I always say to my wife, I have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, slow. I've got to like not go full on into everything all the time and actually rein myself in. So trying to understand the nature of the beast within us. We're all kind of in this autopilot, and we've been in this body for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. Whenever the moment comes when you think, I'm going to journal, I'm going to think about what's going on. Maybe I need to get a coach or a therapist or take some lessons or whatever it is that connects me into my truest self. When you do that, you also then have to learn about your triggers and understand what it is that's going to lead you down the darker paths, and just create awareness. That's the key, whether it's food or life or, nutrition or your mind, whatever it is, it's awareness. Become aware of who you are and where you want to go. And then life is whatever you want it to be from that point.
I love it. How to understand the nature of the beast. Is that what you said? That's
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is, because it's all different. And until you understand your own beast, the nature of your own beast, you're going to be constantly trying to chase the thing and do the thing and compare yourself. And yeah, no, I love it. Man, this was awesome. Where can everybody find you and check you out if they want to learn more about your work and what you're up to?
Sure. So you can find me at justincaffrey.com, CAFFREY.com. And I'm just putting up a new course, which is a 21-day meditation challenge that's going to go up there for people to join in. So there's initial couple of lessons around the psychology, the neuroscience, the philosophy, and then every day there is a 5-minute lesson and then a meditation attached to that. So I want to try and encourage more people to just tap into this. People have really embraced the whole idea of mindfulness and meditation during COVID. So you can find me and find that stuff on there. I'm also on Instagram at Justin Caffrey, and I do a whole lot of stuff on LinkedIn as well. So I talk about mental health and things on LinkedIn that people don't really look at or consider. So you find me over there, Justin Caffrey too. So I share a whole bunch of stuff for free, and there's a whole bunch of meditations for free on my YouTube channel. So I really try and push out as much resource as I can, so that some people will just take a little bit of it and find their own journey and find somebody to help them. But I think, as we spoke at the very start, Lance, most importantly, for everybody who's listening who may be struggling a little bit, just remember, you're not alone. You're not the first person to have a negative thought, and you certainly won't be the last. But find a resource, speak to somebody who you love, and communicate it. Don't hold it in. Please don't hold it in.
Love it. And we'll make sure all that's in the show notes. Everything's clear for people to find you. LinkedIn is such an untapped place, and I love that you're kind of exploring that further as well, because that's something that I want to also dive into. I feel like because of the business world of LinkedIn, initially it was all just really just business stuff. But business is life. We're humans. We need to show the human side of business, which when you get better at this other side, all the the meditations and the yogas and the softer energies, like the feminine side, you become better at your business. Like you become better at what you're doing. So it's essential. Everybody in business in the corporate world, they're going to be better at what they do when they have these practices. Like
100%.
that's the key. That's like the secret potion, the secret formula to becoming the best at what you actually want to do, is being able to have those other things that you're working on in the background. It's just going to make you a more well-rounded human. I mean, isn't that what we want at the end of the day?
Totally. And it's funny, with LinkedIn, a lot of what I post on LinkedIn is from the sea. I live right beside the sea in Ireland. And in the winter, I'm swimming in the sea. I've got my phone in the water. It's freezing cold. It's sunrise. The air temperature's freezing. The water's freezing. And I'm talking to camera about mental health. And people always remember, it's that weird, crazy guy who's talking to his phone. And all I want to do is just trigger people to go, oh yeah, he's talking about mental health. We've just got to shake up the conversation and get people to think about it, because everybody needs help. Nobody is out there who doesn't need help. And the conversation opens up, and then, we hopefully catch a few people along the way before they go down the dark path.
Absolutely. Man, thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. This is awesome. It was so great to chat with you and, go deep
Thanks.
with your story, and just to hear that, what is possible when we actually want to change our lives, and, when we're on that journey of self-discovery. It never ends, but there's always got to be that starting point. And thank you for, creating this path so that people can follow and do the same.
Thank you. Thanks, Lance. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to talk as well. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, man.
Absolute pleasure, Justin. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.